During our last podcast on Monday, when we were recapping the AC Milan Roma game, mostly through the lens of Pulisic and Musa, you wrapped up your spiel by alluding to the fact that Jose Mourinho was sitting in the stand serving a suspension, then you thought he might get fired. And I didn't react to that. I just moved on to the next game and the rundown because, quite honestly, I didn't think he was that close to getting the sack. But you read the tea leaves on that better than I did, my friend, because we woke up the next morning to the news that Jose Mourinho has been fired by Roma after 2.5 years. It's a big call by the American owners. That's the Friedkin family, given the fact that Mourinho is immensely popular with the fans. He did reach European finals in his first 2 seasons there, won the Conference League 2 seasons ago, lost the Europa League final on penalties last season. And the fact that these are new owners still trying to establish themselves. And the biggest feather in their cap had been the fact that they hired Jose Mourinho. So big call by those owners.
Yeah, big call. But, I mean, look, Jose Mourinho, like a lot of coaches, is no stranger to being fired. That he is the special one and he brings all of this baggage, both good and bad, means that if and when this happens, and we know this happens on a consistent basis in sports in general, it's that much more of a story. I don't know if you saw the images of him leaving the ground. And I do think that this was a team that he felt close to. Maybe closer than other teams. He is a mercenary, as a lot of coaches are. But I do think that both Roma and, I guess, Italy, in a way, is near and dear to him. We know he's had past success. And while this one might not be looked at in the same terms as other teams, you could see that it was still special to him. I don't think he was necessarily crying because he got fired again. I mean, he's going to make plenty of money, and he's certainly used to that. But I do think that it came to an end, and maybe he was like you, thinking, well, there's no chance they're going to fire me right now. But, coaches are hired to get fired, and I'm not going to cry for Mourinho. He's going to be just fine going forward.
His contract was up at the end of this season, and when he got called into a meeting with the owner, supposedly he expected it to be to discuss an extension, and instead he got fired. So it did catch him by surprise. Yeah, the thing I would say about Mourinho is he gives himself a short leash by the way he acts, throwing players under the bus, complaining about the lack of spending, complaining about the referees, and also the style of football that his teams play. So it becomes all about results. I think a different coach under different circumstances might have survived, but with Mourinho, there's always this calculation of, is he worth the headache and having to deal with him, especially when you consider that he is the highest paid coach, in Serie A. And as I mentioned, his contract was coming to an end, and they were going to have to give him another big contract to keep him. So I think that was part of the calculation as well.
But you would agree with me that even though we didn't necessarily see it, and I was just throwing stuff out there, I didn't have any inside information, but it's not a ridiculous decision for this ownership or any ownership in this type of situation to make. Although, and it should be said that he's being replaced by Italian playing legend when it comes to Daniele De Rossi, so we'll see how that goes. But another coaching legend in Fabio Capello, he did not see it as something that was warranted, and I think he said that there was a lack of respect towards Jose Mourinho. You don't see that, do you? That it was a lack of respect to him?
No, I don't agree. The owners are allowed to, if they don't think the club is heading in the right direction, they're in 9th place in Serie A with the 3rd highest wage bill, so I think it's surprising, but it's not like a ridiculous move for them to make.
But as is the case often when there is, speaking of baggage, Americans involved either on or off the field, it takes on a new light, and it's kind of catnip for us when it comes to the State of the Union, because Fabio Capello, and for those who don't know, legendary Italian coach, and has been just incredible and done incredible things. He added, after he said that this was a lack of respect for Mourinho, that the American owners, as you just mentioned, these new American owners, they look at football as just a business. And then he said, but to me, to Fabio Capello, it's something more. Now, I can appreciate the fraternity of coaches, managers standing up for each other, especially two kind of old school guys like this that have been around. But the American aspect of it, and I've said this before, yes, they do see it as a business. American owners see club ownership in Europe or anywhere else for that matter as a business because they are businesses. And by the way, when they aren't treated as businesses, that's usually when the problems arise. And if anybody knows about problems, it's certainly Italian soccer over the years. But treating it as a business does not preclude a team from providing or even fostering a culture that is full of passion and romance and pride and love and entertainment and community and history, which I think what Fabio Capello was longing for. And also, not for nothing, but it's not a uniquely American thing to treat a soccer club like a business. Oh, and by the way, Fabio, all of those millions, when you're off at your villa and you're enjoying your time, all of those millions that you made were relative to this business. So spare me.
Now, fans of different clubs and national teams around the world are now imagining Jose Mourinho coaching their team, including U.S. national team fans on Twitter. Now, the U.S. has a coach, Gregg Berhalter. We know nothing is going to happen until after the Copa America at the earliest. But Sean Sullivan did dig up a 2011 quote from Mourinho in which he did express some interest in managing the U.S. someday. So it's not going to happen right now, as I said. But just generally speaking, if sometime in the next few years the possibility came up for Jose Mourinho to manage the U.S. national team, how does that hit you?
I'm intrigued. Only because I think that this is a big, bold personality. In a strange way, there is a beautiful arrogance that is kind of uniquely American in what Jose Mourinho does. He's talked about it before. It would be his correct me if I'm wrong, his first foray into international, which is very different. We all know that's very different. I don't see it happening unless what we have talked about relative to this summer comes to pass. If it is an abject failure from Gregg Berhalter and they say, you know what, again, we just keep getting closer and closer to 2026. If there's a time to fish or cut bait, this is it. And they make a change because I'm not sure that Mourinho is going to be doing anything over this next 6 months. So who knows? You look around in this summer, again, if it were to go to hell in a handbasket for Gregg Berhalter in Copa America, then you might say, hey, this guy is waiting in the wings. You're going to have to pay a lot, and obviously you're going to have to pay to get rid of Gregg Berhalter, but the chances of that, I think, are minuscule, but I think there's still a lot of people out there right now that if you said, hey, take the money aside and the economics aside, and that's a big taking of aside, but would you want Jose Mourinho right now for your U.S. men's national team, and they would bite your hand to take that right now?
There is this school of thought. I've heard some smart people say this, that international football, because of the lack of time you have with players, you have to keep it simple, and it skews a bit more pragmatic. Mm-hmm. And so while Mourinho's style might be out of step right now with high-level European club football, it actually suits international football quite well, and he would make that transition successfully.
I do, and I think he will look to the international game, and it's a very different type of existence. Any international coach will tell you that. To your point, it's good and bad, and it would challenge him in a way I think that other situations haven't. But I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that Jose Mourinho is done with soccer right now. He shall return. The special one shall return.
Well, and on this is a bitter pill for him to swallow because I think he did view Roma as almost beneath him, and he was kind of doing them a favor by dropping down to manage a club of that level. So for him to get sacked, everything he said in the last few months was as if he was turning down offers and he was deciding to stay, and it was all going to be on his terms, but didn't play out that way.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.